Donald Trump is losing his mind.
Lost.
Maybe I misspoke. Donald Trump has lost his mind.
Correct.
People are sounding the alarm bells. There's coverage on this. Various news outlets are talking about it. Real doctors that understand this have given their analysis on this. And I don't think it's a question anymore. Donald Trump has lost his mind. And the question really is, are we ready to invoke the 25th Amendment to the Constitution? We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the procedure. We're going to talk about the history, what it entails, how that works. And we're going to give our take on when and whether that needs to be done here. And spoiler alert, we think it does need to be done. I'm Sean Kernigan. I'm joined by Brian Kabatek, my law partner and co-host here on another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. And if you haven't done it already, check out the other great folks on Legal AF. Hit that subscribe button. We are currently nominated for a Webby Award, not Brian and I ourselves, but the channel itself. So
can we get one ourselves?
I'll make you a little vanity one. I'll make you a little replica and tell you it's the real one. Yeah, well, but if you can, I think Popok has some videos on that explaining how you can vote for that. So do that, support us, support the network, and check out the other great folks. All right, Brian, 25th Amendment. Well, let's talk first about why you think Brian, or I was going to say Brian has lost his mind.
Yeah, that's a Freudian slip, isn't it? Right? That's a Freudian slip.
Yeah,
unfortunately, there's no 25th Amendment to remove me, but I guess...
Takes one to know one, though.
Yeah, you could have me conserved, right?
Yeah, takes one to know one. So tell us about why you think, as someone who's lost his mind, tell us why you think Donald Trump has lost his mind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have to spend a lot of time on this for the people that are watching this. If you see the tweets, if you see the conduct, I'm going to annihilate an entire civilization. How about blockading the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah.
When
open the fucking strait, praise be to Allah on Easter morning. Yeah,
and then I'm going to blockade the strait, or even things as simple as like being glad that Rob Reiner is dead.
Yeah.
Or how about posting a picture of yourself as Jesus and then coming 24 hours later and saying, no, I wasn't trying to be Jesus. I was a doctor.
Well,
I've seen a lot of doctors because I'm old. So I've seen a lot of doctors. I've never seen a doctor dressed as Jesus, but okay. With the four horsemen of the apocalypse in the background, I think, if you look at the picture closely.
That's so good.
I mean, we laugh at this stuff, but, there are plenty of retired generals. His former chief of staff, Kelly, I forget his first name. He personally has come out and said that he thinks he's insane. John Kelly, he was a general and then he was the chief of staff. He's convinced he's insane. People have written books about this, over 200 psychiatrists and psychologists and mental health professionals have signed a letter before he was elected in November of 2024. They signed a letter saying that, and by the way, they concluded that he suffers from a severe mental illness, including narcissism. I've never had a day of psychology training in my life, and I can tell you he suffers.
You can confirm it. Yeah, you concur that he suffers from narcissism. So,
right.
Anyway, well, what can be done about this? Let's assume that he has lost his mind. And that's not a big jump, a big leap to make.
You're right, Sean.
Yeah.
So we turn to the 25th Amendment. So for people watching, I just very briefly, we're going to now spend probably the next 5 minutes in law school. But very briefly, remember, when the Constitution was initially enacted, there were no amendments. The first 10 amendments were added almost immediately. They were added as part of a pitch to get states to sign on to the Constitution. And then periodically over time, we've had very few amendments added since the late 18th century. 1797, I think, was the Bill of Rights. I could be wrong on that date. You can fact check me, please do. And no, I wasn't there. I don't remember it personally. I heard about it.
When's the latest amendment, Brian? What was the most recent amendment? Pop quiz.
Well, I will answer it this way. The most recent amendment was the Equal Rights Amendment. And that's a huge story we should cover on our own sometime because it ultimately was ratified, but people say it was ratified too late. So it never was enacted. I think that was supposed to be the 33rd Amendment or the 32nd Amendment.
No, I think you're wrong on that. I think
it was never enacted.
It
was, well, anyways, people aren't really going to be interested in having you look at your computer and me sit here and talk about, but the point is the 25th Amendment. Let me give a little bit of background while Sean is doing some online research here. The 25th Amendment was enacted as a result of the Kennedy assassination in 1963. It wasn't fully enacted and ratified till 1967. But the point of it was, there was no doubt that Lyndon Johnson was sworn in immediately as president, became president. But people suddenly realized, the Constitution is actually a little light on confirming what the succession plan is and how it works and how it's supposed to work. So let's use this as an opportunity to make it perfectly clear. So there are 4 sections. The first 3 I'm going to go through very quickly. The first one is if the president resigns, Richard Nixon, or dies, like JFK or Abraham Lincoln or whomever, the vice president becomes president. The second is if the vice president leaves for any reason, the president appoints and then Congress approves. That's Gerald Ford. That's what happened with Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford. And the third is if the president, say, for example, is going to have, surgery and be under anesthesia or be unavailable for some reason for a particular period of time, he or she can send a letter basically saying, I'm going to be out of commission for this period of time. And then the vice president acts as, quote, acting president. That's actually the title. So that brings us, Sean,
the vice doesn't become president. He's just acting. Yeah.
It's actually the title is acting president. So, Sean, why don't you take us to Section 4, which is really the important one we're talking about today.
Oh, yeah. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment is about a declaration by the vice president and cabinet members, basically the president's inner circle, of the president's inability to perform the functions and the powers and duties of the presidency. And it has a convoluted sort of, it's not super convoluted. We could talk about, the actual process. But it's basically when the cabinet says, hey, this guy's lost his mind. It could be in other ways where he's not, he's unable to discharge the duties. He is not doing it appropriately and they have concerns about it. And there's a whole process for it. But it starts with the vice president and the cabinet sending a letter to Congress explaining this. They send a written declaration to the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, so both chambers of the United States legislature, and they basically say that he can't act, he can't discharge his duties as President of the United States. And this is a hurdle in this environment right now. So you'd basically need J.D. Vance and the cabinet to do that. And who knows? Maybe that's why President Trump is going around and kind of getting rid of people that we thought were in his inner circle, because maybe they've indicated, some concern about his ability to perform. Because there are inside reports about folks having people within his own circle having concerns about his ability to perform. And then immediately, but temporarily, if it doesn't become permanent, the vice president becomes the acting president, just like in Section 3 of the 25th Amendment. That's what happens here. There's no vote yet. The power transfers instantly. And then the president can respond and say, I'm not unable. I'm totally fine. Just look at me. I'm the smartest president that ever lived.
Stable genius.
Yeah, I'm a stable genius. That's right.
Very stable. Yeah.
And then there's a 4, and you could jump in here anytime, Brian, but then there's a 4-day window where the vice president and the cabinet respond again to the defenses or whatever position the president takes in his initial response. And after that, Congress needs to take over the process. They assemble within 48 hours. They have to assemble within 48 hours. And then they have 21 days to decide. And it basically turns into a full constitutional trial, not an impeachment trial, but a full constitutional trial about the president's ability to discharge the powers and duties of the presidency. And a vote would require 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate. And if they get it, the vice president stays acting president. If not, the president returns to power.
Look, Sean, I want to use. I think you've adequately and accurately depicted it. And
is that good? Did I do a good job? Probably went too long.
But I want to use this as an example. In 1919, Woodrow Wilson, who was president of the United States then, suffered a massive stroke and was incapacitated. So in that case, the cabinet would transmit this letter, and the president would not contest it because he's completely incapacitated. And he wouldn't contest it. And then what would happen is the vice president would become the acting president. And if the president ever died, then, while in office, he'd become president. So there's nothing in the record that I can find that particularly talks about, a very stable genius being indicated as being completely mentally unfit. But that would certainly fit here. And then you would. So the only time the second part of the Section 4 comes into play is if the president contests it. If the president doesn't contest it, Congress doesn't have to hold a hearing. Congress doesn't have to have, a 2/3 vote. None of that happens. And I want to, I obviously I could sit here and talk about constitutional issues like this for a long period of time, but I want to sort of finish by a cautionary comment, which somebody, who watches us and comments, and we're grateful for that. And we encourage other people to do it. Somebody mentioned that, maybe we should loosen up the rules or make it more. First of all, that would be very difficult because you'd have to get a constitutional amendment. It would take a long time.
That's hard enough in and of itself. Yeah.
But even if you did that, this is a cautionary tale, because the fact that this guy is clearly and unambiguously out of his mind, you don't want this to become so easy that a political party in power could try to overtake the presidency. So, I mean, this, unfortunately, the one thing I really don't like about it is that it's the cabinet officers the president appoints who are the ones who would be making the ultimate decision. And in a situation like this, who are clearly fearful of Trump, they could sit there and say, there's absolutely no reason we're going to make that decision because we're afraid of this guy and he's going to lock us up and send us to Guantanamo Bay or something like that. But I think that's really, but the last thing I'm going to say about this, Sean, before I turn it over to you, is I want to let everybody know that I think we've already got Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi to sign on to the letter.
No, we do not. I think the only two people.
I'm willing to sign a letter.
Yeah, the only two people that are willing to sign on to the letter is probably you and me. Brian's totally joking. So, and the letter that Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi would sign would have as much effect as a letter that you and I would sign because Trump's already booted them, right? And all kidding aside, my final thought on this is I think Trump is going around and getting rid of people, and he's probably very mindful of this stuff. He would probably quickly get rid of anyone that's actually considering doing something like this. So this is very hard, as Brian said. It's very hard. The 2/3 majority is a very high threshold. That's hard in and of itself. The massive bipartisan agreement, you need that. It's harder than impeachment, in fact, I think. And the initial step of having the entire cabinet, basically this guy's inner circle. But the fact that we're talking about it, I mean, goes to show how crazy he actually is, that there's people talking about the possibility of this happening. This is probably the closest we've come to someone having the president having the 25th Amendment invoked as a result of them just being crazy and reckless and behaving the way Trump is. So we'll see if this ever comes to fruition. And Brian, again, was kidding about the letter we got from Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem. So thank you for tuning in to another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. Again, if you like this content, hit that subscribe button so you can support us and the other great lawyers on the network providing you this kind of analysis. Check out the other great folks. Leave a comment. Reach out to us. We love hearing from you. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.